Empowerment Congress is strictly nonpartisan owing to its nonprofit status. So we don't advocate for one candidate or the other. Um, it is essentially our intent to make sure we maximize voter information. That is to say, we educate, we engage, and we empower. That is the Empowerment Congress motto. John Lewis was clear that the vote is the most powerful tool we have in our nonviolent toolbox. Pleased to have Pastor William D. Smart on the call with us. Um, in the tradition of Dr. King helming the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California, and the work that is being done to make sure that we are not unmindful of a decision that was made by the U.S. Supreme Court just last week that effectively turned back the clock on all that was accomplished pursuant to the blood, sweat, and tears of Selma. That Edmund Pettus Bridge was essentially blown up by this Supreme Court. More to be said about that as we move forward. Um, and so the question of the significance of this primary can't be stated strongly enough. I'm going to step aside with respect to any further remarks that I'll make at this moment. I want to take the opportunity to transition to our main speaker so that we can be uh, wise about the amount of time we have and maximize her opportunity to share with us. Um, Shakari Byerly comes to us as a result of being distinguished now as one of the leading pollsters, not only in LA County, not only in the state of California, but reaching across the continental United States of America. Dartmouth trained as an undergraduate all the way up to the PhD at the University of California, Los Angeles in political science. Spent some time in the state legislature as a Jessim Unruh Fellow and more. Worked in a number of polling entities, branded, and then she stepped forth and started her own firm with her life's partner, her husband, Rodrigo Byerly. So they make a powerful team, and they now have a team of just under 20 other people who are part of Eviterus. And we are as proud of what Eviterus does as we can possibly be. And before I go too much further in celebrating Shakari, I'll let you do that by virtue of the merits of her presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you then Dr. Shakari Byerly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ridley Thomas, my forever supervisor. Appreciate you and thank you for your investment in Eviterus. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit to where credit is due. We have on the line Eviterus founder and CEO, Rodrigo Byerly,
Yeah.
who founded the company back in 2007 before I joined, and also our president, Raquel Beltran, who is with us at Eviterus, esteemed colleague, founder of UDW back in the day, world-class organizer and public servant across a range of domains. We're very thankful to have her at Eviterus. And at Eviterus, research is a team sport. So we have a number of researchers, as Dr. Ridley Thomas has shared, who have joined our team to help us do this important work. And we're joined by Caden Sheps, who is the primary research associate behind the California Voter Index. So we are able to do what we do by grace, but also with the ready and expert hands of those who are a member of the team. So I have to give honor to that. And also Dr. Ridley Thomas and Vincent Harris, who were among Eviterus's first supporters and clients and have always highlighted our work and helped us to lift up the voices of all communities. So thank you. It's my pleasure here to review for you the publicly available data that is a part of the California Voter Index. And I'm dropping in the chat a link to the California Democratic Party's website. So Eviterus was selected and commissioned to conduct polling every other week in the California governor's race after it was clear in the filing deadline that there were 8 Democrats in the race at that time, and less clear if all or any were viable candidates to make it into the top 2 primary. And so the chair commissioned research to provide the public with full information, not just the crosstabs or a summary memo framing the results, but not just the top line, but the underlying data by subgroup. And so I will walk you through how to access that information, because we know that merely providing information is not always equated with access and being able to leverage that information. So Eviterus is committed to ensuring that members of the public to read and use the information that's publicly available. This is nonpartisan research, even though it's commissioned by the Democratic Party. We are neutral, so to speak, and not supporting any particular candidate, merely asking the public what their views are and tallying the results and presenting them available for everyone's review. And so I'm going to share my screen and take you through to the web page for the voter index, which gives you more information. You can read there for yourselves the description of the project. And we have done 4 polls thus far. The latest poll was released. Today is Tuesday, right? It was released yesterday, Monday. We were in the field for roughly 2 days, Thursday and Friday, and finished up a few of a small amount of the data collection on Saturday. And we'll walk through the top line and the crosstabs for that. We surveyed 1,200 California voters, and these are what we call likely voters. So we're looking at people who are either newly registered since the last election, which was the Prop 50 election last year, or they have voted in prior primary elections. Now we have designed the sample so we have at least 100 or so what we call opportunity voters who may not have participated in primary elections previously, but because we don't want to restrict the information just to the high propensity voters. So it's possible to break out the results by those who are most historically likely to participate, as well as those who may not have the same vote history, but can still be mobilized. There's an opportunity to engage them and have them participate. Our baseline poll was conducted back in March. So that was our first poll, and you can see that presented here at the bottom of the screen, and their top line and crosstabs there. That was a much more robust instrument. We had 2,000 Californians to participate. So we were able to provide more information in the first poll about subgroups. So we not only were able, for example, to look at Black voters or Latino voters or Asian voters, white voters, we're also able to look at all of those subgroups by gender and by age. We were able to look at, the faith community by different parameters. We were able to look at people with disability status. We still have those results in the tracking surveys, but since size is smaller, we can't segment to the same extent. We always want to have at least 100 responses because there's something called margin of sampling error, which means if I run the poll 100 times, 95 times I'll be right, at least within plus or minus, but 5 times I'm probably going to be way off. And so that's the caveat with polls. You never really know which, if you're in the 95% or if you're in the 5%. So that's always something to keep in mind. The poll is one form of data and information. It should never be your only form of data and information, but it is can give you some important incredible insights. So let's get into the top line results. So the top line is essentially all of the questions that were asked on the poll and the percentage associated with each person that took the poll and their response rate. So the first thing we ask, for example, question 1, we let people know there's going to be an election. And we ask on a scale from 0 to 10 how likely they will be to vote. 0 being they definitely will not vote, and a 10 meaning they definitely will vote. And so you can see the results. The first column is the most recent poll, Tracker 3. The last column is the initial poll. And so we've had very high levels of engagement. Nearly 9 in 10 voters say that they are committed to voting, those that are participating in this poll. This is designed to be a likely voter poll. Not all of the polls that are being conducted are among likely voters or even verified voters. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of the data. I'm happy to talk more about the methodology, which we have some details of that at the top of the document. But let's get right into the key question of the hour, which is the results in the governor's race. So we asked people the question as simply as possible, presenting them with the information that they will receive on their ballot, which is to say the names, ballot labels, and partisan preferences of those who will be on the ballot. And these are the top candidates. There are more candidates than the ones listed here that will be on your ballot. So we present people with a bit of a preface. As you may know, there's a primary election for governor. Governor Newsom has reached his limit and will not be running for re-election. If the election was held today, for whom would you vote? And the names of these candidates are randomized. We do not tell voters at the onset that some have dropped out because we have no guarantee that they're going to know that when they walk into the voting booth or they fill out their ballot. And so we merely present the names of the top candidates as they will appear. What we see in this recent poll, the margin of sampling error is roughly about 3 points, plus or minus 2.83, but roughly 3 points. So when we look at these results, we say, okay, 18%, that could be 21, or it could be 15, right? Plus or minus 3, just by random sampling error. If I took the poll 100 times, 95% of the time, I'd get a number in that range. What this tells us is Hilton's numbers have not really changed. He's not above 3 points of where he started in March. So he was at 16%, went down to 14, went up 2 points to 16, went up 2 points to 18. So even after the announcement by the president giving an endorsement, we don't see any real change here outside of sampling error. We do, however, see a dramatic jump for the candidate that places second in this most recent poll, which is Javier Becerra. So he also is at 18%. Now, some of these numbers don't sum precisely because we do rounding. When we get to the crosstabs, you'll be able to see explicitly what I mean by that. They both have 18%. But there's a point difference here. So Hilton has 17% who say they will vote for him. When we follow up with the people that are undecided, 1% say, well, I'm undecided, but I'm leaning toward him. Becerra, 15%. say that they will vote for him initially. And when we press those who are undecided, 3% say that they will support him. So, we place Hilton first for the reason that his committed support is higher than Becerra's. Becerra started at 3% in the baseline. He went up 1 point, again, sampling error within the margin of sampling error in 2 weeks later. April 17th, after Swalwell dropped out of the race, you see a big spike, 13%, from 4 to 13%, so nearly 10 points. And then even more growth outside of the margin of error this most recent week, right? So another 5 points. Remember, our margin of error is 3. The second tier of candidates, if you will, includes Chad Bianco and Tom Steyer. Are both outside of the margin of error when you think about 18 and 14%. So that's 4 points below the top two candidates for Bianco and 6 points below for Steyer. The third tier includes Katie Porter at 8%, Matt Mahan at 7%. And then the next tier, you have Viragosa and Thurman. And notably, we have a few people who are still supporting Yee and also Swalwell. When I go back up, when we look at Bianco's numbers, again, very consistent from March to date. Likewise for Steyer, no real bump since the initial survey. He's, 2 points essentially. From March, he was at 10%. Now he's at 12%. There have, however, been some shifts within subgroups that are more notable. We can talk about that. Since we did not share with people, and one final thing as we go through, if we're looking at changes, forgive me here, no real changes for Steyer. Likewise, Porter. Just differences are not really discernible. They're roughly within the margin of error. Some shifts for Mahan, 3% to 7%. Very little shift for Viragosa. No movement for Thurman. And no real movement for Yee either, even though she has dropped in the race. The undecided, however, is also a place where we see some dramatic difference this week. Right? So in the baseline, you have roughly a quarter of voters who were undecided. That was the case essentially until April 5th. Then around the time Swalwell dropped out, you begin to see some movement with the undecided voters. That's even more so this week. We're dropping 6 points from 20% down to 14% undecided. Now, we also have some people who would prefer not to share their vote with us. we register that opinion as well. And some people who say they're just going to skip it, but it's a very small number. We follow up just to place everyone on level playing field with information that Yee and Swalwell have suspended their campaigns. And then we ask the revote. Again, people are pretty much paying attention, so you don't really see differences here between the initial vote and what we see here. So the order of candidates is the same. Hilton and Becerra are still at 18. Bianco bumps up a little to 1 point to 15. Steyer roughly stays where he is. Likewise for the other candidates. Okay. And then we lose 1 point here in the follow up. In the undecided, it goes from 14 to 13. And then we have a range of demographic questions that tell you what the sample kind of looks like or what its orientation is. This becomes most interesting, I think, when we get to the crosstabs. And so the crosstabs is every question in the survey with columns for different subgroups. So this is the document that's often most challenging for people to understand. and read. And I apologize for the small print. I can't enlarge the web document. But I will drop the link in the chat in case you're able to enlarge it on your screen. Let's see if I can do that here. Okay, so you have the cross tabs there. And you start with this first column. It's all of the voters in the survey, 1,200 people. And then we have different subgroups. So if we want to understand how are different people of different political parties voting, well, one thing to note is when we ask people on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to vote? Very high percentages for Democrats and Republicans, 90 and 91%, say they'll definitely vote, but a 10-point drop off for MPP and minor party voters. So your American Independent, Libertarian, Green Party, Peace and Freedom fall into that same category with no party preference or NPP voters, which is typically the case. Well, then we can go down to the vote question, what we call the vote question, question 1, and we begin to see differences. So, for example, Tony Thurmond, 2% of Democrats are supporting him. There are 603 Democrats in this poll. 0% of Republicans are supporting him. There are 357 Republicans in the poll. 2% of no party preference voters are supporting him. There are 240 of them in the poll. All right. So who are the top vote getters among Democrats? It is very clearly Becerra. We scroll down. He's in this column here, row 72, column D. And we can see the percentages, 29%. If you go up top, it's not actually 29, it's 28.596, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why sometimes the numbers don't sum precisely, because they're not whole numbers. They're many decimals behind those numbers. And so 29% of Democrats support Becerra, 18% support Steyer, 3% support Villaraigosa, 2% support Hilton, 10% support Mahan, and just going up, 13% support Porter, and I mentioned that 2% support Thurmond. And then when you look at Republicans, the top vote getter is Hilton by 8 points. So 48% support Steve Hilton, 40% support Bianco. And every other candidate only gets, not at most 1% of the Republican vote. What's interesting is the undecided. So only 6% of Republicans are undecided, compared with 17% of Democrats and 22% of no party preference voters. I also have up the crosstabs from March, our first poll, our baseline. So I'm going to switch over there. You can see the sample size is different, 2,000 here. And if we just want to look at here in this, I happen to have up the race ethnicity crosstab. So again, it's a larger poll, so you can see the breakout for, Asian American women, Asian American men, Black non-Hispanic women, Black non-Hispanic men, Latinas and Latino men, non-Hispanic white women, non-Hispanic white men. And you can look at how the vote varies. I wanted to point out the change in the undecided. So you can see that the undecided overall was 24% back in March. And you can see across race and ethnicity, how that breaks out. 32% of Asian American women were undecided at that point, compared with 25% of Asian American men. And the shading tells you when there is a statistically significant difference, right? So if you hover over the triangle, you can see it will tell you there's a significant difference between Asian American women and Latino men, white women, and white men. So it helps you to be methodologically sound when you're looking at the numbers. And notably, because of the sample sizes, even though there is on its face a difference between 25% and 32%, we can't say with statistical confidence that that is a genuine difference because we don't have a large enough sample to reduce the margin of error around that. Because your margin of error is going to be about 10 points if you have, maybe it's 6 or 7 points if you have about 200, respondents. So you can see we have 185. So while we have a point estimate, we just use caution when we talk about what the actual opinion is or whether or not there's a difference. But there's a large enough difference between Asian American women and, for example, Latino men who are at 19%. That's a big enough difference, even though the sample size is smaller, to say that it's statistically significant. So I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to answer questions as it relates to walking through the subgroup tabs for the most recent or prior polls. But you can see we have not only party on file, but we also ask people whether they consider themselves a Democrat or Republican or something else. And if they say something else or they're independent, we say, well, do you lean toward the Democrats or you lean toward the Republicans? And so we group the results by strong Democrats, not strong Democrats, and independents who lean Democrat versus those who are purely independents versus the Republicans and leaning Republicans. And you can see how the vote breaks out. In this poll, we also have gender. We have the vote by region, self-reported age, under 55 versus over 55, race and ethnicity categories, and we have what we call a banner, which is a cluster of these columns for a mutually exclusive category. So essentially, Latino of any race, Black, non-Hispanic, either alone or mixed race, and then Asian American alone and white non-Hispanic alone. But then we also break out the binary. So Asian alone or in combination versus not. Black alone or in combination versus not. And you can see the sample sizes that are associated with each one. We also have party on file broken out by gender, party on file broken out by age, Latino men and women, non-Hispanic white men and women. We don't have enough sample size to go further with our other ethnic groups. We have ideology, whether people are progressive, liberal, conservative, whether they're in a union household or not, their nativity. So whether they're first, second, third, or fourth generation or non-immigrant background, born in the U.S. versus not born in the U.S., say they have a disability versus say they don't have a disability, if they own or if they rent the place where they live, their education, income level, whether they are a parent of school-age children, their church attendance, their socioeconomic status, which is a composite of home ownership, household size, and education and income, their vote history. So you see we have 135 people who have never voted in a primary. So that provides some insight, whether they voted in the special election, their generation, this vote likelihood question, and vote history propensity based on the file, and then also the vote broken down by the leading candidates. So Porter voters, what are her demographics? You can scroll down and say, for the voters who are supporting Katie Porter, if I go down, what percentage of them, for example, are liberal versus conservative? So 43% of Katie Porter's voters are progressive. That's how you read that cross tab. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to take any questions about the poll.
Well, Dr. Byerly, I know based on the comments that I see in the chat as well as the texts that individuals who are on this Zoom have forwarded to me, that everyone is extraordinarily appreciative of this tutorial, not only on what the most recent survey says about what is happening in the election, but to dig deep into the crosstabs and understand how to read the underlying information that is part of a good poll. So I want to thank you a, a great deal for providing us with the opportunity to further understand stuff that we might read in the newspaper about this poll or that poll and not know all that goes into it. And so, again, we're greatly appreciative. There is a question from Adrian Shropshire who asks, how does the black vote break out among the front-runner Dems?
Yeah,
And
thank you for that question, Adrian. Let's see. Let's go ahead over in our crosstab columns. Scrolling here. And so if we look at all those who say they are Black, both alone and in combination, that's 143 voters. And I'm going to have to scroll up. So forgive me if or scroll down, I guess. So this is that initial vote. And I'm just going to take them in order that they appear. So 3% of those who identify as Black are supporting Tony Thurmond. 9% are supporting Porter. 3% are supporting Mahan. 4% are supporting Hilton. 28% are supporting Becerra, who is the leading candidate among Black voters. 11% are supporting Bianco. 9% are supporting Steyer. 1% are supporting Viragosa. 2% for Yee. 0 for Swalwell. And notably, 28% are undecided. And that is, I believe, the largest percentage across ethno-racial subgroups.
you said that's the largest percentage?
Yes, let me double check. So 19% of Asian American voters are undecided, 28% of Black voters, 13% of Latino voters, and 14% of white voters. So by far the highest percentage of undecideds. And if you couple, that 28% with the 2% that say they're going to skip, or they will not share their opinion, that you're nearing a third who are indicating they have not made their choice.
Wow.
So that's considerable. That could, change the how the vote is shaking up within that population, so to speak. There are still quite a few votes out there that could change the the ranking.
Do you have a crosstab that indicates how many African Americans are no party preference voters?
We don't have that in this poll because we have not broken things out by party. I'm going to go back to the baseline poll where we have a larger sample size and quickly see. I'm not certain we have broken it out, at least not in the public tab. So there may be some additional analysis we might have been able to do I don't think we tabulated it by race and ethnicity. I think we just did gender by race and ethnicity. But we know that the NPP kind of minor party, so to speak, segment is a growing segment across every community, including the Black community.
Right. Does anyone have a question that they would like to pose to Dr. Byerly? And if so, let me ask you to use your virtual hand to signal your willingness to pose a question. I know MRT has a question. He's just trying to be cool.
That's because I am cool. I'm deferring to those who might otherwise wish to pose their question. Want to quickly give indication of my affirmation of the presentation. Helpful. I find it very interesting when you drill down to the concentration of undecideds among African Americans in particular, which makes the case for voter engagement among this core group of voters, this particular electoral slice. It's critically important, particularly against the backdrop of the decision that was made by the Supreme Court. And it's going to be interesting, I think, Dr. Byerly, to look down the road a bit and ask what impact might that decision have in places not simply like Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, but in California specifically. Perhaps you could opine on that.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up. What we know from our experience with Proposition 50,
Yes.
and I'm excited to see Adrian on the call who can speak about this, is that one of the top mobilizing messages for Proposition 50 was the fight for voting rights and the attack on voting rights that was happening in the South, and namely Texas, and the importance of California voters and California Black voters in standing up and raising their voice unequivocally against what was happening across the country. So we can imagine, if you will, that there is even more commitment to making their voices heard in this current climate with the recent decision.
Dr. Byerly, there's a question in the chat from a member of the Leadership Council of the Empowerment Congress who wants to know when polls don't accurately predict the outcome, what's the reason?
Mm-hmm.
What might be some of the reasons for polls being off a little bit and a lot? And could you say something about the Bradley effect as you respond to that question,
Yeah,
particularly
well,
since we may see it with regard to Becerra?
yeah, thank you for that. Well, there's one important caveat to make, which is polls are not a crystal ball. And the media loves to, I think, hype up the horse race and the predictive element, but polls are not a predictive tool. They are a snapshot in time. And we know that the environment is dynamic. So they are not designed to predict who will win. They're designed to tell you at this particular moment in time, how are people telling you they will vote or not vote? People change their minds. And importantly, dynamics change, which can impact the alignment between what the data shows in a particular poll and what actually happens on election day. The other thing to keep in mind is methodology matters. So what you may have data but who's represented in your data? And are the assumptions built into your research instrument and design, how credible are those assumptions? Many times with science and data, we think it's objective, um, but there are biases, right? We know that averages, estimates can be biased. And so it's important to understand what those blind spots are and what the data truly represents. And I'll give you an example. There was another poll that came out recently, all online panel. The respondents were recruited from a panel, and we don't necessarily know how they got into that panel. And so the poll that I just presented is a very different methodology. A poll is only going, if you're using the poll to try to understand kind of what may happen on election day or how people are feeling, it's important to ask those people you think are likely to vote or could potentially vote, and to be very intentional about defining that. So we pull, for example, from the official voter rolls through PDI, people who are registered to vote. We know that they are registered. We know that they are on the file. Now, there are people who, kind of register same day registration. We aren't capturing those, but we are honest and upfront and transparent that those people are not included. And so on election day, if they vote, our poll would not have captured that sentiment. So it's important to understand that. The Bradley effect. There is more than one form of survey error. Sampling error, the plus or minus 3 points, plus or minus 4 points, that's only one form of error. People cannot tell you the truth, which is for folks who don't know, the polls had Mayor Tom Bradley winning in the California governor's election, and that did not accurately reflect the outcome. And the research suggests or showed that people were saying that they were supporting him, but when they went into the ballot box behind us, they did not check the box for Bradley. And so the effect is, particularly for candidates of color, there's some socially acceptable response bias involved, where people, if you're talking to them on the phone, we used to do all of this on the phone, you're more likely to say, oh, yes, I will support that candidate, as opposed to when you go in your voting booth and no one can see what you're doing. Now, I can't speak beyond the data about whether or not those who say they are going to support Becerra will actually check the box. That's a different question, I think, for a different call after this project has concluded.
Right.
So I won't speak on that, but I think polls are also part of the calculus. Is what's your turnout model? Who are you polling, and who do you think is going to vote? We know that polls capture what we call super voters, that 80 or 90% who are definitely going to turn out. They have a particular point of view that is typically very different than our opportunity voters. So if you have more opportunity voters, your election results are going to look more like what's in the crosstabs for the MPP voter than they are the top line, which is driving your average, right?
Right. So there are several more questions in the chat. Reverend Johnson asks, will there be another poll, another survey that will be part of the voter index that Evideris has been commissioned to undertake by the California Democratic Party? And if so, when might those results be made available publicly? And my question is, how much does something like this cost?
Uh, the first question is the easiest one. That we are planning for every 2 weeks. So May 18th, I believe it's the day, is that Monday after next,
Yeah.
when we will release the next poll. So we will typically go into the field on a Thursday. If you get an email or a text message or a phone call, please pick it up. We we want people to make it into the poll, and we work really hard to make sure that Black voters, and particularly AAPI voters, which have a lower percentage in the electorate, actually were able to reach our target in size of at least 100 responses in those communities. And it is not easy, and it's often more expensive to do so. So I think that speaks to your latter question. I don't have the numbers on me on the current, poll, but
It's an appropriate question, Shakari. You don't have to entertain it.
Well, I wanted to give our participants an idea. I know it's not cheap for a poll the size of the one that you are conducting, but this information is very, very important. And for those of us on this call who think that, well, maybe should be surveying more African American community members, particularly those who are opportunity voters, to understand what motivates them to go to the polls, then we have work to do in terms of identifying the resources to make that happen.
yeah.
That was really the pretext, if you will, for posing the question. But a typical 2,000 person survey of the sort that you conducted in order to initiate the tracking poll, uh, per per person,
Hmm.
what is the range
Yeah.
of
Shakari, do not answer Vincent's question. You do not have to negotiate in public.
inquiring minds
Well,
want to
Stop it.
know?
Stop it.
what I can say, good doctor, is the polls are a function of a number of things. We still call people. We try to reach people however we can, and we think that's important because some of us will not answer an email with a link. Some of us will not answer a text message, right, with a link from, even though we identify ourselves, a Vitterist here. Um, they're not going to do that, but they will pick up a call from a number, even if they're not quite sure, who it is. Now, we are missing some folks just do not, will not answer the phone, answer the text, answer the email. We try to mitigate that by making known who we are so people can go Google our name and then understand that it's credible. But that's always it's getting harder and harder to reach people. So what does that mean? That means we have labor costs, and we know what it takes to pay a minimum wage. It takes about 150 calls to get one completed response.
Wow.
So we are reaching out to hundreds of thousands of voters every 2 weeks, millions, essentially,
Yeah.
over the course of this project. And so we also can no longer do automated text. So all text messages have to be person to person. Again, if you want to do high quality work from an equity perspective, which means you pay people fairly for the investment they are making to carry the work, that means that you is going to be built into that. And we try to be economical and efficient. But if you want quality and if you want equity, that requires investment. And it requires investment in diverse communities as well, so that the callers or the people that are, running the data, they look like the communities from which, we're surveying. And so that is a part of the cost and the calculus. The poll is also a function of the length. How many questions are you asking? This is about, I think, 8 to 10 minutes. It'll be a little longer when we added that follow-up question. We'll have to now add a question about whether people have received their ballots and whether they voted already. So this is planned for about 8 to 12 minutes, and then it's a function of how many people are in the poll. So
Right. There are a couple more questions. I know that you didn't make a commitment to stay on for the whole hour, and so I certainly do appreciate your efforts and those of the rest of the Evitarist team. We have one question from Bishop Byron Smith, who asks if there is information about um, uh, members of the faith community who may be high propensity voters that you have in your survey instrument, and if so, can that be reviewed?
Absolutely. So in both the tracking stuff and back to the crosstabs, one of the columns does break out the um, attitudes by um, church attendance, which is often a good marker of the faith community. And I'm just trying to scroll here. So we have now we aren't able to break them out by age and region and cultural community, but it's more. I don't know that any other poll is including this question. And so we who attend at least once a week, at least once a month, at least once a year, or never. And it's a pretty healthy in size for those who are more frequent church attenders, 268. And so when we look at the vote, 26% for Hilton, 13% for Becerra, 27% for Bianco, 9% for Steyer. And so a lot of this is driven by partisanship across race and ethnicity. I would venture to say that, well, I know social science tells us that black voters grounded in liberation theology have very different attitudes than voters from other faith traditions. And so a lot of what's in the crosstabs there is driven by the different lens that our other brothers and sisters bring to their faith and politics. So,
Great. We have time for one more question, and then we need to move on to the rest of the agenda. Uh, I think before I pose the question, I want to remind everyone that our next Government Reform and Accountability Working Group meeting is on Tuesday, May the 19th. So the day after the next tracking poll uh, performed as part of the voter index by Eviteris will make itself known to us, um, on May 19th. So you should anticipate that we will try to highlight developments during that Government Reform and Accountability Working Group meeting. It's doubtful that we will be able to have Shakari or other members of the Eviteris team join us for that meeting. However, I did want to take this opportunity to publicly invite you if you so wish.
it's my anniversary. So
Oh, so
we have
check this out. These
21
guys,
years.
this is wonderful. They got married on Malcolm X's birthday. All right.
All right, Vincent.
All
Yeah,
right. Sorry. So, um, so that question I wanted to.
he's he's headed down that rabbit hole. Y'all better hold him back. Let me just say with respect to the meeting 2 weeks from the night, we're going to be focusing on Measure ER. I want to seize this opportunity to invite everybody on the call to come back and invite someone else to join. This is critically important in terms of health services in the county of Los Angeles. That is to say, health campuses are at risk. Public health clinics have already begun to close. The federally qualified health centers are at risk, and more. You need to know about it. You need to learn about it. You need to go tell it on the mountain, over the hill, and everywhere. What is at stake here? Now, I believe, Dr. Byerly, you are doing some work on that as well. Some insights to the extent that is permissible would be appreciated. One last question or comment, pardon me, is this. You made reference to the sampling and the difficulty in reaching AAPI and African Americans, et cetera. Can you quickly give a profile of, I mean, ethnic profile of voters in the state of California, and if you want to drill down to the county of Los Angeles, so that those of us who are on the call have an understanding of where white voters are, where Latino voters are, where African American voters are, et cetera, et cetera. I think some granularity in that regard would be very, very enlightening.
Thank you for that question. So, one of the challenges is the size of the percentage of the population of voters who are Black or self-identified African American, and we don't have a list.
Okay.
Right? We don't have a surname. Last name is not always a good indicator. We are more dispersed than we've ever been. So census block density is no longer an efficient and effective strategy for finding out where people who identify as Black live or what their contact information is. And because of that historic harm,
Yeah.
people are more protective or especially protective of their information, of who they answer, who answers the phone, who knocks on the door. Like we have tried to, we do various forms of recruitment. And so Black voters are roughly between 4 and 6%, depending on the jurisdiction of the electorate. We know that this is a likely electorate. Asian American voters about 10%. Latinos are about between 23 and 25%. And the balance are white or folks from other ethnic backgrounds. And so when you talk about, if you have a
I
sample
want you to run
size of
that again. All right. I want everybody to hear that. All right. Please, once again.
Black voters are about between 4 and 6% of the electorate on paper, at least, right? Asian American voters are about 10%, Latino 23 to 25, and the balance would be made up of white and other minoritized populations like Middle Eastern, Native Americans, probably like 1 or 2%, each. So that's roughly the lay of the land. It's about 48%, 50% are non-Hispanic white, despite a different kind of contour of the general population of the state. So
it's worth everybody letting that sink in.
Right, and the impact that performance at the level of our proportion in the population means a great deal more in that context. So the typical turnout statewide in a primary election is in the 40s, is it not? 40%?
yes, I
Los
will
Angeles.
say when we had the in 2018, we got up to I think about 60%, which was historic. And so when you think about this
Yeah.
election, what's a likely model given the circumstance we find ourselves in? If the investment and mobilization is there, which it was in 2018, we even had the youth vote at 30%, I think, in 2018 because of the investment in mobilization
Yeah.
dollars,
Yeah.
dollars,
Yeah.
saying
Right.
that again, dollars
Mm-hmm.
coming into communities to turn out and energize and educate. And one important thing that we often hear from young people, especially, is I don't want to vote wrong. And so I'll vote, but I want to be sure that I know what I'm voting for, because I'd rather not vote than to make a selection that's on my conscience that is wrong. And so education and information is vital in mobilization.
So when we reach out for attendance at our next Government Reform and Accountability Working Group meeting, we should be sure to try to target some young people, young voters, uh, who are more than likely to be opportunity voters, as opposed to those of high propensity. There are two questions. There's one in the chat. It says, what does accountability need to look like in order for people to actually feel the impact of their vote and of the systems that are asking us for more tax dollars, or candidates who are asking for more resources or who support more resources to fund governmental practices?
Yeah,
Is
that
there
I think is
anything,
the
is there
question
anything
of
in
the
the,
hour.
yeah, is there anything in your surveys that maybe touch that question?
Well, we are talking to voters a lot about a range of topics. Um, what I think what I can share is, um, I think that there needs to be more ongoing mobilization beyond the election. That isn't an answer to, how can we kind of secure accountability on the front end, but educating people about what they can do in between elections, showing up at that council meeting. I mean, doing the work of the Empowerment Congress, but pulling more opportunity voters into that process, I think creates the accountability that needs to happen, because we need people to show up consistently to remind candidates, to remind campaigns that we turned out, we voted, we're still here, we're going to be visible, and we're not going away.
Kenny, you have a question.
Yeah, real quick, and if it's handy, two demographics. Do you have the age breakdown? And do you have the age breakdown by Black and African American? Just want to see the age bracket of, both of those demographics, total ages and the Black African age breakdown.
Yes, we have we have the total age. We do not have the breakdown for Black voters in the initial study. We may have it in the baseline, which was larger. And so if I share my screen again, give me a moment, we can at least look by age. Okay, so if we're going across the top here, so the first thing we can look at is 18 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 64, and 65 plus. And so when we go to the candidate question, where do we see our differences? So we see a notable difference for Porter, at least between our 50 to 64 and our 65 plus. She's getting 10% of the vote for 65 plus, and 4% among those that are more middle aged. I'm actually going to start, let's see, with the top candidates. So when we look at Hilton, his support is heavily concentrated among older voters. So he's at 3% with 18 to 29-year-olds, but 22 and 26% among those that are 50 or 65 plus. Becerra has his concentration among younger voters. So 18 to 29-year-olds, 26% of them are supporting Becerra, compared with the lowest proportion is among 65 plus at 14%. Another leading candidate, Steyer, is at 22%, among 18 to 29-year-olds, 20% among 30 to 39-year-olds, much lower levels of support among those 60, really 40 plus, compared to those that are under 30. The undecided is also higher for younger people and some middle-aged folks. So 1 in 5, roughly, of 18 to 29-year-olds are undecided. And then likewise for those who are middle-aged. And we often see that for our 40 to 49-year-olds. And if you think about where they are in the life cycle, these are folks that may have, teenagers or, multi-generational households. And so they often, are managing and juggling a lot. And that's why they will have difference in attitudes and also vote propensities. You can also see the vote by under 35 versus over 35. And then we have the generational breakouts, which are slightly different than the breakout that starts with 18 to 25-year-olds. So that column is over in the end here, I believe. Okay, so it's columns DU to DX if you want to look at the vote by Gen Z, Gen X, and Boomers.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have the racial breakdown, the black age breakdown, right?
No, we don't. We may have it in the baseline vote, the baseline survey from March 4th, but we don't have it in this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Byerly, there's one question in the chat about the unhoused. Can you?
It's challenging to reach those who are, there are some that are represented, and we likely do not have at least 100 responses, which is why you don't see it represented in the cross tabulation. But we do ask the question, and I just closed my top line. Actually, no, I have it up. So I'm just going to pull the number of people who tell us that they do not have stable housing, because we do ask it. See if I can do a search here. Okay, that's not helping me. Let me, while I go to it, let me just say that, we reach out to people in a variety of ways. And the importance of still making telephone calls is that people who do not have a smartphone, even if they are unhoused, they may have a telephone where we can call them. And they may have a prepaid cell phone or a cell number that they listed when they registered. They may also have a smartphone and be able to get an email from us. So reaching out via multiple modes is often a way that we ensure that people that may have less stability in their lives are able to participate. Our research among those who are unhoused, which we've done a considerable amount of research to try to address homelessness, particularly our Listening to Black Californians project, and also our Listening to Californians with Complex Needs project. We actually talk to people who are unhoused, and there are folks that have cell phones. They get support in order to be connected to services through their phones. And so I'll pull up the number to represent how many are in this study, but that is something that we're very attentive to. We know that this is a portion of what we call coverage. How much coverage do you have over the broad population? That's one of the things where polls may fall short. When we do our work research among the unhoused, we're often going to them. So for our Listening to Californians with Complex Needs research, we actually went out with the USC Street Medicine team to conduct our research face-to-face. We go where people are, as opposed to trying to outreach and pull them in a mode that's convenient for us. But again, that cost, that's investment is required in order to add the layer of rigor that's really necessary to uplift voices in a meaningful way.
All right. Are there any final questions or, for that matter, comments that Dr. Byerly, you and the rest of the Avitters team might want to make at this time?
No, I think thank you very much for having an interest in this work. We're very excited and feel blessed to be able to do it. And I always say, without you, there is no Evit-to-Russ.
Mhm.
So we really appreciate and want to honor the partnerships that we have with our civically engaged organizations like the Empowerment Congress. I did find the number for those who um, say that they don't have stable housing. It's about 1% of the sample. Um, and we have 9% who's living with friends or family. So that could be, multi-generational households, or it could be because they do not have other forms of stable housing. So
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you again very much for joining us. And
Big shout out to Eviterist for this
we
excellent.
definitely look forward to seeing you again sometime if we can impose on you and maybe even your better half.
absolutely. Well, I love this is, I love to be among I call my people because you all know from whence I come. And so I'm a part of the family and
Yeah.
appreciate always being welcomed home. And we'll make it when called upon as long as it's not my anniversary.
Ah, that.
All right. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
All good.
All right.
You.
It would be appropriate for us at this time, since we've been talking a little bit about voting and its importance, um, for us to hear for a moment from Pastor William D. Smart Jr., the executive director and president of the California Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California. Pastor Smart, could you tell us a little bit about SCLC's reaction to the Supreme Court decision?
Well, it's horrific, and we immediately, I know for time, we immediately went to the city council leadership to say, and we're expecting them to say, put forth some type of motion that in it would show their inclusion. It would show that there will still be on a path to building, to making sure nothing is affected. Right now, as there's the need for fair protections and equity and accessibility is going to be just as important as it is in southern United States. We cannot afford to move back in LA also. So, when we begin to talk about reforms in the city, they have to be equitable reforms. They have to make sure that the votes is one group's vote is not inhibited while another one's is accentuated in some capacity. So this is a thing we're waiting to see from this motion, and some SCLC and some of its partners have put the motion together, sample, but you'll never know what they'll do. So I don't even want to say much about it. But when they put it forth and when they're about to vote on it, I would hope that we will galvanize all of us to come out and be there and speak on it, and speak and make sure that change and moves in the right direction. Secondly, that the second thing SCLC is working on is a comprehensive civic engagement program, and our director of it, I think I saw her on Sandy Cook. We're pulling together like Mark, I mean, like Dr. Thomas used to do and you used to do, Harris, just fulfilling and standing in those shoes. We're pulling together comprehensive voter education and promotions and get out the vote all the way from May all the way to December. I've been on these national calls since it's happened. And one of the things that all the groups are committed to is this, in light of what happened, as we try to get through and deal with what direction we're going to do, we're going to go. One thing is emphatic is we must have the greatest voter turnout we have ever had at every single level, from dog catcher on up to U.S. senators. And so that's a commitment that SCLC is making here, but and along with the Empowerment Congress, we'll be working together around this. And many churches, I guess Sandy is working on some 25 churches also to work with us, and following the Mark Really Thomas commitment. And so we're ready, really ready to move on this. So
Thank,
that's where we are right now. And I'm giving a shout out to, of course, Dr. Thomas and you. And I see Norman Johnson, one of our leaders there, and Bishop Byron. And then I see Harry and Mary, my comrades in the suit. Good to see y'all with us today. And we will fight like we fought then. We will fight to make sure every vote counts, and nobody in this city, this county, Southern California, loses their right to vote.
that's right. That's right. Well, good.
Amen.
We appreciate that.
Are you happy now, Vincent?
I am. I'm
Okay.
very happy. I mean, you know, the point is that this decision that was made last week doesn't just have implications for voters in the South.
That's right.
It has implications for how we do redistricting in California
Exactly.
and in Los Angeles.
Exactly.
So our representation is on the line, and our ability to cast a vote that can influence public policy is on the line. And that's why
And
we
that's
need
why it.
to mobilize
Mhm.
local government so that they know we're watching and can communicate to their counterparts at other levels of government and nationally that the impact is not just confined to the states of the old Confederate South.
Right. And I'm like I said, we're waiting to hear back from the leadership of when we thought it was going to be today or tomorrow when they're going to put that motion forward. And some of the things you just said are in that in our sample, but they can go whichever direction they want on it. But like I said, all around the country, and I'm sure many in on this phone on this in this has been on calls or know about these calls all around. Not from clerk, even one of the things that really moved me today was the Church of God in Christ is moving on this. And traditionally, never mind. I'm just excited they're moving on it too. That's all.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Smart. Let me shift a little bit. What we had planned to do was, if there were there was enough time, we were going to contemplate shifting to catch some of the debate that is currently being broadcast on CNN. Let me just get a quick, by let's say a show of virtual hands. Is there an interest in doing that, or should we proceed with the regular order um, in our agenda? Anybody want to switch to CNN? I see one hand, two. Okay. So I, What do you think, MRT?
Think the majority rules. That's what I think. It seems like most people are essentially communicating that they want to proceed, and those
All right.
who do not can bounce back, or if we want to live stream, we can do that as well. I just want to make sure that people put June 20th on their calendars. June 20th, we will have a Juneteenth celebration of consequence. All of you will be invited. And in that regard, you will hear much of what we are talking about tonight express itself in a new initiative. In a new initiative. Stay tuned.
All right.
June 20th.
So, Courtney, if you would mind putting the agenda up on the screen.
One more.
Vincent, we've been going for about an hour already.
Right. I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the issues that this group had identified in connection to the governor's race that we should be mindful of whenever we do look at either the video of the CNN debate or any of the other ones that may be in the future, or if we look back into the past. We also have some resources that may be available to folks that they'll want to use. Um, so there's a question here about the candidates and where they stand on key issues that I know a lot of people want to get information about before deciding for whom they will vote or determining whether they will vote at all. Uh, One of the things that we did at our last meeting was demonstrate how artificial intelligence, particularly the artificial intelligence that's available to us for free, can be utilized to at least get the contours of what appears to be a candidate's position. Typically, those AI tools provide people with the source material from which they draw, so you don't have to depend entirely on an artificial intelligence medium's interpretation of what a candidate's position may be. So an example of what could be done to find out where people stand on specific issues is to pose the question, what is the candidate's, whatever their name is, position on whatever the issue is? And so by doing that, I'm sure you will find way more information about that candidate's position than you even thought about. But at the same time, it will contribute to your own education about what some of the issues are that are underneath questions like affordability or taxes or housing or homelessness or climate, etc. The first 10 questions that I have on the screen that are identified as key issues are the questions that appear in the Cal Matters election guide. And if you were to go to the Cal Matters election guide, you will be able to see interviews that are conducted of all of the candidates, all of the major candidates, the ones that we've been discussing in this poll, on those 10 questions. So you can see their responses on video to how they feel about issues associated with affordability or issues associated with climate change or issues associated with healthcare, even artificial intelligence. Can you push the agenda down just a little bit more, Courtney? In addition, CBS News has also conducted a variety of interviews with candidates on many of these same topics. Some of the issues that they don't cover, however, may be issues of importance to the African American community. And so, what I recommend that you do, for example, is ask the question, what is Tom Steyer's position? And I'm just using him as an example on reparations. Or what is Chad Bianco's position on the Calais decision? Or how will candidates advance or um, support voting rights? Those are questions that we all may have that we won't typically see in the mainstream coverage of candidates' positions. And so we should use the technology that's available to us as long as we take the time to validate and verify that information by going to other sources to find out what they are doing, what they stand for. On this agenda, at the bottom, you'll see that we took a survey of Zoom participants back in December, on December the 2nd, and they identified these 10 issues, uh, or identified the three ones that are highlighted in yellow as being the top positions of government reform and accountability working group participants back on December the 2nd. Folks wanted to know where the candidates fell on the questions of homelessness, housing insecurity, and affordability, what their stand was on healthcare coverage and how they would advance access and address disparities in healthcare. And then finally, where do they stand on the issue of voting rights, ballot access, and election administration? Those were the top issues by category, broadly speaking, that GROG participants, Empowerment Congress participants in these meetings were concerned about back in December. And so if you use that as a guide, then those may be the kinds of questions that you would pose to artificial intelligence. I will also mention that on Thursday, May the 14th, the housing and the homelessness working group is going to have its own version of election ready, focused on housing, affordability, insecurity, and homelessness. Rhea, if you are available, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Mr. Harris. I'm always happy to talk about the homelessness working group. Thank you so much for mentioning that and for your support. We would like to continue the great work of the Government Reform and Accountability Working Group at our next meeting, which is on Thursday, May 14th. Please excuse my voice. I'm recovering from a cough. And at that meeting, we are going to it's continuing in our Empowerment Congress Election Central series, and we would like to again address how many of the candidates and measures on the ballot how homelessness will be impacted, and what potential measures and candidates' positions are regarding serving our unhoused Californians and unhoused Angelenos. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
You're welcome. Before we conclude the meeting, I also wanted to suggest, as MRT had said earlier, are you election ready? And what you can do to make yourselves ready for the election now that ballots are beginning to land. One of the things that we know we need to do is first check to make sure that our registration status is current. And I am going to put into the chat the importance of making a plan for participating in the election. Now, many of us may be veterans, and so as a consequence, don't think that we need to concern ourselves with a plan. But because the way this election is unfolding, we may decide that we're not going to decide until relatively late. It's important that we've given some thought to just how late we're prepared to wait and how best to discharge our citizenship obligation in the last week or so of the election. Does that make sense? We want to know, for example, we should find out in advance where are our ballot drop boxes or our polling station. And we shouldn't, so we need to look at the information and make a plan. My computer is acting up, and so I am not able, for some reason, to cut and paste prepared materials into the chat for some reason. I had a bunch of links that are also available on the Empowerment Congress website at the Election Central landing page, where you can learn how to track your vote. You can learn how to check your registration status. You can find out where your voting center is. And so I would encourage all of you, if you don't already know, to go to the website to get that information. The last thing I wanted to mention is you should look up Cal Matters website, the League of Women Voters website. Each of those has important information that may assist you in developing your voter plan or obtaining information about the candidates. Does anybody have any questions before we conclude the meeting?
Mr. Harris, we dropped our Empowerment Congress Election Central link in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm here fiddling with my computer, still trying to make this thing work. In any event, we want to thank you again for your participation in this evening's meeting. We hope that you will join Rhea and the Homelessness Working Group on May the 14th. If you are interested in learning more about housing, affordability, and insecurity, as well as homelessness, for a very robust discussion of that issue. And then join us again on Tuesday, May the 19th, for the conversation about local ballot measures that in Los Angeles County, but particularly Measure ER, the proposed half-cent sales tax increase in order to fund health services. With that, MRT, Bishop, you want to give the benediction?
I want to thank you, Mr. Harris, for your leadership. And we trust that everyone has had an hour and some change of time well worth our commitment to increasing civic engagement, raising the civic IQ in our communities and beyond. This is important work, and we just need to stick with it. So again, Vincent, we thank you for your leadership.
All right. With that, thank you all, and we'll see you the next time.
Thank you.